evening, everybody. Welcome to the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. This is our monthly special collections lecture series. We do them on the third Wednesday of every month. I see a lot of first-timers here, so welcome. Just a little housekeeping. If you could silence your phones, we would be forever grateful. We'd like to welcome everybody at home watching on Facebook Live. If you're not familiar with the Special Collections Department, we're located on the second floor of the main library right here. We are a local history and genealogy department. We do lots of fun stuff up there. Right now, we've got a great exhibit going on in our department that looks at Baton Rouge staycation. So lots of old maps and travel books and little tchotchkes that you would get from around places like the state capitol or the museum. So we encourage you to go upstairs and visit and get to know our fun little hidden department. We don't get a lot of visitors off the beaten path, but we encourage you to come see us. Next month, our lecture will be focused on the 60th anniversary of the Catholic Diocese in Baton Rouge. They're a wonderful archive there. They do a lot of great historical research. They're a wonderful repository with some very smart archivists working there. I'm not saying that just because I am a smart archivist. Tonight, we are happy to have three panelists here to talk about the industrial or the hemp industry in Baton Rouge. First, we have Dr. Gerald Meyers, who has a PhD in plant breeding from the University of Missouri in Columbia. Dr. Meyers' first appointment was a postdoctoral fellow at the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture in Nigeria. He arrived at LSU in 1994 to take over the cotton breeding program, which he still runs. Part of his research time became devoted to industrial hemp in 2019. He is editor-in-chief of the Journal of Cotton Science and serves on several other editorial boards. His teaching efforts are in the area of quantitative genetics, and his research specialty is in the field of genotype by environment interactions. Next, we have Kaylee Deynzer. Kaylee is a Louisiana native and received a bachelor's degree in horticulture from LSU. During that time, she worked closely with vegetable crops, organic farming, and the local food movement. She was president of the Sustainable Agriculture Club at LSU for 2 terms, worked as a horticulture intern at Franciscan Missionaries of Our Lady Healthcare System, educating employees on numerous aspects of the garden, and studied sustainable agriculture development throughout Thailand. She is now studying towards a master's degree in horticulture at LSU, and her research is on best management practices for organic hemp cultivation for essential oils. Finally, we have Bruce Q. Williams. Bruce is a native of Baton Rouge, an artist and a photographer. His work focuses on environmental justice and contemporary social issues. His exhibit of photos of the hemp industry in Louisiana is currently on view in the second floor, and if we have time after this, I encourage you all to go check it out. I love Bruce's photographs. They're really wonderful, and these are no exception. Please give them all a warm welcome.
Well, thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you for those introductions. And thank you, Bruce, for orchestrating all of this. It was a lot of work, and as many of you know, he came out to our research station and documented a graduate student's research, Sam DeBoard. And so in a moment, he'll speak about all of his specialty, which is photography and not my own. But I'm excited to be here tonight because, you know, this past year, we've given a lot of talks about hemp, but only in an academic setting. So we've talked to students and extension agents, but never to the public. And when you take a step back and look at this industrial hemp program in Louisiana, we are doing it for our community. We're doing it whether you're a farmer wanting to learn how to grow this plant or someone with back pain and you're trying to find an alternative form of pain relief. All of our research endeavors are trying to help the community. So thank you for being here tonight. I personally don't think there is a better way to spend your Wednesday evening. And without further ado, Bruce, you can take it away.
Hey everyone, my name is Bruce Q. Williams. I started this idea, I guess you would say, about a year ago. So it's in 2020, Once the pandemic and everything started to happen, the discussions kind of slowed down, but that kind of also gave us some more time to get things organized and figure out how we wanted to present the public research to everyone. After some more talks we had, I went out to the fields and Kaylee pointed me through everything. I went and photographed the plants in different lightings, different compositions, so people could see the plants up close, how large they are in scale versus like other smaller plants growing. And there were also some grad students plants there as well, so kind of showing the different plants between like the head. I shoot everything on film. I like to do film primarily because of the process. It's very process driven, so I develop all my film myself. My kitchen sink and or studio typically, and then that's scanned in by myself. I edit everything. Like a great opportunity. Once I spoke with Melissa, I did an exhibition with them 2020, and after that we wanted to have a public talk for that one. So when I approached them with this conversation, they were very eager to make this a public event, and especially after talking to LSU, Kaylee, Dr. Meyers, kind of good opportunity to be able to, like Kaylee said, the public to hear the research. Especially the past year, I think it's like hemp products in general, I think have kind of gotten more trendy, kind of like right. So in a minute, we'll show y'all all the photos of everything. Kaylee and Dr. Meyers will talk about some of the research that's being done. And as that's going on, we'll pull up them from time to time. Composition happening while we got a presentation that's just going to talk. Dr. Meyers.
Yes, I'll just interject here a little bit before Katie gets started. I'm just one of the faces of many people actually at the LSU AgCenter who are involved in industrial hemp. Due to legislative changes in 2018, the LSU AgCenter decided to initiate a program. We actually have a team of myself, there's another plant breeder, we have an entomologist, a pathologist, an economist, a couple of horticultural people, weed scientists as well. I think the response that we put together is reflects the initial interest that was in industrial hemp. If you go back to 2017, 2018, there was tremendous interest not only locally and in the state, but also nationally in industrial hemp. There was a lot of promises being made about how lucrative this business could be. As time goes on, we are finding out that the lucrativeness is less there, and it being more of the Wild West is a better acronym for what the industrial hemp really situation is largely in the United States. There have been a lot of companies that have come and gone. There have been a lot of producers who have tried industrial hemp and are no longer in industrial hemp. Nevertheless, if you go back and look at history, it's one of the oldest fiber crops in the world, and it has a myriad of uses and may offer a potential for an alternative crop in Louisiana. Never going to be a huge crop, but it is an alternative crop that may allow farmers and producers to diversify their incomes. So we are working on it. We are only in our second year. We're still learning a lot, as you may see from some of the slides. Just as the Wild West is excited, it's kind of exciting to be in industrial hemp right now, and we'll see where the wagon train goes. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kaylee, and she's done an excellent job of putting together a presentation. Before we jump into that, if there's any questions, just before we jump in, I would be glad, I think we'd all be glad to entertain anything that might come up. That is correct. I will actually have a picture later. Probably the most common clothing item right now comes from Patagonia. They make various range things of pants, bib overalls, etc., out of hemp. There are some alternative markets that actually may be quite lucrative, more suitable to Louisiana, especially in the area of hemp herds. And I'll pass these out as Kaylee gets started, so you can see these. And so when I get around to talking about hemp herds and actually fiber, you'll have an example, know what those about. In relation to cotton, it is actually an older natural textile fiber than cotton by a couple of thousand years. In comparison to cotton, it's a longer fiber. Cotton would typically get up to about 1¼ inches in length, maybe a little bit longer when you get to the Pima or Egyptian cottons. Hemp fibers can be several inches, 3 to 4 inches in length, so they're considerably longer. The problem you run into compared to cotton fiber is almost 99.9% pure cellulose. Hemp fiber has a lot of lignins and other nasty things. Well, nasty is the wrong word, but gums that we have to get out of here. And that's a problem. And we're actually in the process of writing a proposal right now with a materials engineer at the Renewable and Natural Resources Department at LSU to see how we can do a better job of going from fiber in the field to fiber that's suitable for clothing. And we'll be collaborating with the USDA on that. Cross our fingers that we get funded. Okay. So with that, let's get.
First and foremost, what is hemp? Because I think there's still a lot of misconceptions about this plant. So the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018 defines hemp as the plant cannabis sativa and any part of that plant, whether it's the seeds, the stems, or the cannabinoids, extracts, that has a delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol content of no more than 0.3%. There's two things I want to highlight about this definition. The first is 0.3%. So as soon as it exceeds that number, 0.301, it is no longer compliant and we can no longer keep it on our farm, keep the product on our shelves, and so on. And the second thing is that long word, tetrahydrocannabinol. That is THC. Now, this definition points out delta-9 THC. So there are actually multiple forms of THC that grow in the hemp plant. And the only one that distinguishes hemp from marijuana is delta-9. For example, there's a delta-8, which is perfectly legal to grow. Many farmers grow it and it can have up to 10-15% of this delta-8 compound, but that's okay. The only one we're concerned with is delta-9. And I just wanted to highlight that because a lot of times we use THC as a blanket term, but it's not always, that's very not a clear definition. So I wanted to give y'all this visual of hemp. Both belong to the same genus, both cannabis sativa. Now, over hundreds, if not thousands of years, we have bred them to have altering levels of delta-9 THC and other cannabinoids, but they belong to the same species. So when we're talking about cannabis as a whole, we could be referring to both. But if we say hemp, we are referring to hemp with a low level of delta-9 THC. And if we say marijuana, that is different as well. Here's another visual for you. I know CBD and buzzwords right now, but there are hundreds, if not thousands, of cannabinoids that we have even yet to discover. So as you can see on this slide, there's several forms of THC. There's CBN, CBG, which some people would argue that CBG is the new C. So needless to say, there are plenty of cannabinoids. And if you're interested in research, this is a great field to get into because we know hardly anything about this. It's a whole new world for us to learn about. Now, we know what hemp is, but I want to talk about the history of hemp because a lot has happened from beginning of time to bring us here today. So The first traces of hemp were actually found in ancient China and Mesopotamia. It then began to spread around the globe, and it found its way to North America in the early 1600s. Fast forward only 100 years, American farmers were legally required to grow this crop because they found it so useful and resourceful. Farmers had to grow it for both food and fiber. Now, hemp reached its peak production in the early to mid 1800s, and this was largely part to supporting World War II endeavors, growing fiber hemp for cordage for the Navy. Now, a few fun facts because we are at the library and learning is supposed to be fun. So, ancient China was often referred to as the land of mulberry and hemp. George Washington himself grew hemp for industrial uses at Mount Vernon. Fact number 3. Any farmers of the original American colonies were required by law to grow hemp because it was so critical to establishment and survival, and also to support the rapidly growing demands of the. And my fourth and favorite fact for you is that for almost 200 years, you could pay your taxes with hemp. It was so widely utilized that it was considered legal tender. So I would like to bring that back personally, maybe if we can get the hemp industry up and running again. But needless to say, if hemp is such a great plant and we've used it for so many years, how did we get here today? Why has there been such a gap in our use with this plant? So in 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act was passed, which essentially imposed strict taxation and regulation on the plant, making it very hard for both farmers to grow and consumers to. And this led to the eventual prohibition of hemp in all forms of cannabis. Fast forward to the late 1990s, certain states allow the production of medical marijuana. And this is really what kind of got hemp's foot in the door because people didn't forget how useful hemp was. And so if we can cultivate medical marijuana, why not cultivate hemp that doesn't have the psychoactive effect and make it more available to the people? So a lot of public advocacy has gone on from then until now. And in 2014, the USDA Farm Bill approves the cultivation of industrial hemp for agricultural state departments and universities. By 2018, our most recent farm bill that was passed, it created a national regulatory framework for hemp groundwork. 1 year later, Louisiana was able to create our own plan that was approved by USDA, which then brought us to last year, our first ever growing season of hemp. So if anything positive came from 2020, we're now able to cultivate hemp, which is really exciting. Dr. Meyers, would you like to talk about her?
I can jump in. Kaylee and I will probably jump back and forth because of various things that we happen to know. So as she said, in 2018, there really was a large expansion of the industrial hemp program across the United States. And as a result of that, we actually formed what is known as a multi-state project, which actually received funding from the U.S. government. So get funding from USDA to run this program. And it is coordinated out of Kentucky. Why Kentucky? Well, despite the fact that we talk about hemp coming from Southeast Asia, it is really much more adapted to temperate zones. If you look at where hemp is grown, industrial hemp is currently grown successfully, you're going to have, in the United States, you're going to really have to go to Kentucky, Tennessee, Canada. I mean, so it's much more adapted to colder climates than it is here in the Gulf South. You also have to go to Europe. Europe is much further ahead of us in the industrial hemp in terms of processing, utilization, that we do import stuff from Southeast Asia. So we are now in the process of doing a coordinated trial where we're trying to see whether we can grow hemp, all growing the same material, all roughly the same time of the year, and seeing where that goes from there. So we hope to be able to provide a more unified national picture of where hemp is, where hemp can be grown. And there are also some other additional efforts that are related to this. Kaylee was mentioning during World War I and almost leading up to World War II, hemp was being used quite a bit as cordage. And so you've also heard the word ditchweed. And if you go actually through many of the more along the fence lines in some of our upper Midwestern states, Iowa, Kansas, etc., don't be surprised if you see plants that look a lot like industrial hemp, and the answer is they. So they do exist all over the place. You look at the acres planted, hemp is still not a very big crop compared to most other things. According to the USDA in 2019, roughly 150,000 acres was being grown. There was a slight increase in 2020, but not a significant amount. And the average farm size for hemp is small. It's only 22 acres. This is not your main crop unless you are really into the essential oil market. A lot of people, it's not. If you look at fiber hemp farms, most of them are probably more in the 80 to 100 acres in size. I believe in 2020, we had roughly 600 acres of hemp being grown in Louisiana for grain or for fiber. And of that's roughly 500 acres, 495 essentially were destroyed. Largely due to pest, disease, mismanagement. One of the issues we have in management, I'm just going off on some tangents here. Some of the issues we have in management is, since we think about CBD, we largely think of it as an organic product. It's something we want to rub on our skin as a salve, or there's actually inhalable forms of CBD as well. So we want to go organically, but there are no labeled insecticides and no labeled herbicides for growing industrial hemp. So it is a very labor intensive crop. If you have to rely on hand labor to weed 5 acres, not many of us want to do that. That's why the average farm size is so small. Here we have some historical pictures of fiber grown hemp, and you can see on the, I guess, lower left, when they harvest it out in the field, it has to go through a process called retting. And retting is basically to break down the lignins that are between the fibers. And so this is called field retting. There are alternative methods. There's a wet retting process as well, where basically you put it in a pile and you sprinkle water over it and you let the microbes over a period of 1 to 2 to 3 weeks break down a lot of those pectins, et cetera, that are between those fibers so that you actually have something that you can. In terms of Louisiana, as I say, a lot of this got a lot of impetus for a lot of the work in the area of hemp. Started with the medical marijuana program, and in Louisiana, there both LSU and Southern universities both have partners for providing materials for the medical marijuana program. So we're the only 2 places that can do it. Southern has Advanced Biomedics LLS, and LSU is partnered with Welcana. In terms of industrial hemp, both LSU and Southern University operate under a research exemption we have from the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry. So this negates our need to get a grower's license and other regulatory hurdles that might exist. However, we are not the only institutions in Louisiana who are working on industrial hemp. There are programs at McNeese. I'm so sorry for any McNeese along that name. UL Lafayette and UL Monroe are also doing programs, but they have to have growers' licenses to do this. Regulations. The regulations basically cover 4 different areas. There are the grower. You could be a seed producer. Seed producer is actually a bit more encompassing than that because you can grow hemp from seed, but the most common way, especially if you're growing it for CBD or essential oils, is to actually start from clones, because Kaylee actually will go on to this later, but hemp is a dioecious plant, so we have males and females, and we're really interested in the females and not males. So if you go through clones, you can ensure out there. Processors, I know there is a processor down area. How far along they are, I really don't know. Then also, just to move this stuff around, you have to have a license to be a contract carrier. So moving it from a farm to a producer, from a farm to a processor, you have to have a license to do that as well. These are all separate. In terms of 2020, these are some statistics from LDAF and the Farm Service Administration. In 2020, they licensed nearly 2,800 acres. Only 932 were planted. Only 171 were harvested. 748 acres failed. So it is precarious. It is as precarious as the Wild West was as well. In terms of what they're growing, 8 were producing for CBD, 47 for CBD, 5 produces for fiber. And then you can see at the bottom in terms of certified acres, also the 231 of those are for fiber, 140 for CBD, and 5 acres for. This is just a further breakdown again from LDAF in terms of license types, the license that were applied for, some that were pending, withdrawn, or suspended. You do have to go through a police background check if you want to be. That is a necessity in terms of getting a grower license. And I'll go. Actually, I'll take the next couple of slides because I actually saw this in 2019. As I said, there have been many talk about potential uses for industrial hemp. There's grain, fiber, and then we get to those essential oils. If you look at grain, you may actually see on some of the markets things as hemp hearts, hemp seed oil. Hemp seed oil tastes. They say it kind of tastes like olive oil. It's a bit grassier than olive oil to my taste. It's also hemp protein. The seed is actually very high in protein, so you can make various hemp powders, etc., for health drinks as well. Here's the seed. Believe it or not, all those veination patterns on those seeds are unique to varieties, and so you can actually varieties by the veination patterns on some of those seeds. In terms of other industrial uses and fiber, my son, who was a junior in high school, just did his independent research project on producing hempcrete. So we ordered a box of hemp herds, and we'll pass these around when I pass the mic back to Haley. So he was looking at making hempcrete and looking at thermal conductivity, compression strength, compared to regular concrete at various ratios of herds to binder in there. Fiber. Actually, if you drive a European automobile and you happen to open up the panels inside the doors, some of the insulation that may be behind the panels may actually be derived from hemp fibers, from non-woven hemp fibers, not from woven hemp fibers. And then here we have an example where fibers have been used to make. As I said, there's non-wovens, insulation. It can be used in various composites. It's kind of hard to see, but there's actually a coffee mug there that uses a hard composite made from a hemp product. Clothing was a question asked earlier, and there's an example of image of a pant offered by Patagonia. They are very durable. And the question that I didn't get to, that component of that question I didn't answer is hemp fibers are very durable. So they last long. And hemp herds, as I mentioned, may have a niche market as well. They are an excellent animal bedding. In fact, they're finding in Kentucky that they're getting more for hemp herds for horse bedding than for hay or some of the other products that they may have used traditionally. Since we do have a horse industry in Louisiana, hemp herds may have a market there. Essential oils. Drive down the street, you will see CBD shops here, there, and every place else marketing various products, not only for our own benefit, but for our furry friends as well. At this stage, I'll let Kaylee take back over, and then I'll probably.
I know Dr. Meyers just covered the uses of fiber versus essential oil, but really, when we talk about hemp, these are the two biggest categories, and I wanted to give you all a visual. So if you look at the picture on the left, fiber is almost an entirely different plant than it is for essential oil. So it gets to from 6 to almost 10 feet tall, and you grow it as you would any other agronomic crop. So just like corn or sugarcane, you plant once, you harvest once, and you use a tractor. Now, if we move to the picture on the right, this is actually taken at DuPont Nursery in Plaquemine. And for essential oils, grow as a horticultural crop, meaning you bait. fertilizer, water, mulch, irrigation. And oftentimes you're in highly controlled environments such as a greenhouse, a hoop house, and so when we talk about hemp, it really is important to kind of distinguish which variety you're referring to, because you do about your cultivation practices or post-harvest practices very differently. So for my purposes, I'll be talking about hemp for essential oils. But what makes this so complicated? You know, if it is a horticultural crop, it's very similar to growing cut flowers. However, I know Dr. Meyers mentioned some of this already, but it is very labor intensive. That we have limited access to herbicides, fungicides. Here in our climate where we get so much rain, so much humidity, we have so much disease here, roll it like we would with a tomato. Also a crybaby, I like to say, because it has very specific fertilizer demands. It needs more than your average plant. However, if you give it 1 teaspoon too much, it does not respond well and your plants might die. At the same rate, if you let your plants get signs of deficiency, if it was a tomato, it would bounce back, and 3 days later, your yellow leaves would be green again. But with hemp, once you start getting signs of chlorosis or really yellowing leaves, it is very hard to bounce back from that and get a strong, green, healthy plant. Also have to ensure you have a feminized plant stand. Grow only females for the essential oil production, because what we're harvesting is the flowers. It's a female organ of the plant. So ensuring it's only females, you need supplemental lighting so that your plants stay in a vegetative state to grow. As Dr. Meyers mentioned, it might grow like a weed in other states, but not here. It is very hard to grow. So I want to elaborate on 2 of our sort of complications here. One is the fact hemp is a dioecious plant. So we have male and female organs on different separate plants. So you can buy something called feminized seed, and it's when you get seed from a reputable producer. However, hemp gets stressed in our hot and humid climate. So whether it's stress from heat or humidity or too much water, one of its stress responses is turning into a male. Or it could even be turning into a hermaphrodite, which is having both male and female parts on the same plant. So you could take the extra step, buy your cuttings, get your feminized seed, but you still might have a male in your field. So it's important to scout your field daily, if not weekly, to ensure that if you find any males, you remove them, because male pollen can travel up to a 3-mile radius. So you could have 1 male plant and it could pollinate your whole entire field. And so if you're a female hemp plant, you are growing flowers. The whole point of a plant's existence is to carry on its life cycle. That's all it wants to do. So if you're a female and you're not getting pollinated, you're going to produce more and more flowers. That way your odds of catching pollen are increased. Now, if you get pollinated, then you completed your life cycle, the next generation goes on, you're done. So when you have only female plants, you not only increase your yields, quality of your yields, because you get higher amounts of essential oils when it's females, and you don't get seeds in your plant. So you get a lower market value whenever you have seeds in your plants for processing. Another key component or factor to talk about when we think of hemp is the fact they are photoperiod dependent, meaning that the sun very much alters whether or not they are in their vegetative or reproductive state. So hemp is a short day plant, meaning that it needs 12 hours or more of day length to stay vegetative. As soon as it enters into a short day, meaning 12 hours or less, it will begin its reproductive phase of its life cycle and start growing flowers. Now you see here on the screen I have 14 hours, and that's because, once again, 12 hours isn't enough for hemp. That is the actual definition, is 12 hours, but hemp really needs 14 to 18 hours of day length to stay vegetative. So we as producers can use this to our advantage. We can keep plants in their vegetative state for 6 months if we wanted, grow as big as a plant as possible, and then when we're ready for them to start growing flowers, flip the switch, and they'll begin producing the bud that we are after. So bigger plants, bigger yields. Other than that, you really do grow this plant as a horticultural crop. So site selection is important. You want to get a place with good aeration and good drainage because we have heavy clay soils here. So site selection is crucial if you can maybe put it in containerized pots. Planting date is another factor because we want to avoid the potential chance of freeze in the spring. However, if we wait too late to plant, we're facing the heat in July, potential hurricanes in late summer and early fall. So there's lots of factors to consider when choosing your planting date. Dr. Meyers mentions we often grow from seed, but we start these seed in as transplants in the greenhouse before moving them out into the field. But other than that, we have basic cultivation practices like white plastic mulch because the white keeps the soil temperatures cooler than traditional black plastic does. We use drip irrigation because we want to minimize any moisture getting on the leaves because that once again increases our incidence of disease and insect pressure. And then just getting adequate crop and row spacing to once again get plenty of aeration between our plants. So a few production challenges. We have little to no reliable hemp genetics here in our state. Most of what we are growing right now is grown and bred in states like Colorado and Oregon. And when we bring them back here to our hot and humid South, they are not happy. I have one variety in particular that I grew last year, and every single plant turned male because it was stressed. So they don't like it here. So really, a big part of our success in the future will be finding suitable genetics for our climate. And there are some people working on breeding. I know we have people here in Louisiana. We even have people out of state, but genetics are key. We also have rains, hurricanes, and clay soils, which is the opposite thing that hemp wants. That being said, it leads to pest pressure, disease pressure, limited access to resource to control these. And outside of Louisiana complications, we have just an overarching picture of that. It's a large investment. So it costs on an average $10,000 per acre as startup investment you have to put into this plant, which, it's like high risk, high reward. However, the market is so unstable right now because we are having so many people beginning to grow this plant. Supply and demand is constantly changing. And for example, biomass of CBG prices dropped by 82% since November 2019. And this fact was actually found in 2020. So in 1 year, prices dropped 82%, which is very concerning if you were a producer growing CBG. So lots of things to consider with hemp. It is the Wild West. And this calls for the need for research because hemp has been cultivated for centuries, but we have little to no documentation on actually how to grow it. And what documentation we do have, it's all coming from northern states like Colorado, Oregon, even Kentucky, and we really cannot translate that knowledge down to our hot and humid South. So we Louisianans really are starting from scratch, and we're trying to figure out how to acclimate it here to our home state. So this brings in our roles at LSU. And so beginning first with my graduate student research, I am working with field-grown hemp for essential oils, and I'm trying to grow this in an organic manner because that tends to be where a big portion of the market is. So I have two components to my research. One is in the field and one is in the greenhouse for a germination study. But the overarching theme is the same. The whole reason I'm doing all this work is to create a best management practice guide for farmers to be able to know how to grow hemp in the field in Louisiana. So for the sake of this talk, I'm only going to talk about my field study, which I actually started last year. So I'm now embarking on my second year of research. And I have three main objectives. The first is to determine optimum planting dates. I want to also look at in-row spacing in order to maximize the amount of plants you can put per acreage because you're saving resources that way. However, you want to give them adequate in-row spacing and between-row spacing. That way we can minimize pest pressure once again. And I'm also essentially having a variety trial. I'm looking at 7 varieties this year, and combined with last year's data, it'll be 12 to 15 different hemp varieties to see which do well in our state. So move on. I'm taking basic plant growth measurements each week in the field. I'm also taking into account insect disease and nematode pressure and just looking at general plant growth, health, and vigor. And once I harvest these plants, I'm looking at fresh and dry weight of the entire plant, the bud weight or yields, and I'm doing extensive cannabinoid testings in the lab afterwards. here is Sam DeBoard. He is another graduate student, and Sam and Bruce are the reason we're all here today, because Sam provided the plants and Bruce provided the photography skills. So he really wanted to be here tonight, but he sadly could not because he had a trip out of state. But he has put in so much work, hours and hours of work into his project. So y'all be sure to go out and look at the pictures. But he is working on containerized hemp production. So our studies kind of go hand in hand, because whereas I'm looking at it in the field, he's looking at it in a more controlled environment, but still similar variables that we're searching. So he's also has a study looking at herbicide residue. But once again, for the sake of this talk, I'm only going to talk about his field work. So he has 4 hoop houses, all with containerized plants. He's also looking at planting dates. However, he's looking into, in terms of containerized production, he's looking into black and white pots and their effect on plant growth. So black pots are actually an industry standard, and they do not sell white pots. Manufacturers do not sell white pots. So he hand painted every single pot. And this is because in our high temperature South, a lot of plants that are grown in pots crack and they don't do well, and their roots are stressed because of the high temperatures. So he's trying to see if these white pots are really bringing us lower temperatures and our yields are good, maybe we can get these manufacturers to start making white pots for producers. And so far, these are preliminary results, but he has found a 10 to 15 degree difference in container temperature already. That's substantial. So I'm hoping we see a difference in plant growth as well, and that way it can show it really is worth producing these white pots. He's also trying to correlate pot size to plant yield, in addition to number of plants per pot and plant yield. And also he has many variables and looking at plant substrates within each pot, so different growing mediums. He is taking numerous data each week, looking at pot surface temperature, media temperature, the diameters of canopies and stems, and I'll save this. But so he is doing a lot of great work. But in addition to this, we have fun research. So it's not only in the field and it's not only in the lab. We have people like Cheston Shayo, a fellow graduate student. He is growing hemp as microgreens, and he's looking at nutritional content. But he's also finding that when you grow these plants, even at a young age, they are producing cannabinoids, even without the flower. So this is just another area of research we can look into now. So, and I don't think anyone has really done this before.
So you would say like a lot of this research, since there is little of it, you have to kind of think outside the box. Like you said, though, the black pot versus the white pot, or kind of like the tropical depression we have like this week.
Yeah, I would argue that yes, there are some interesting things to do, especially when you consider it more of a horticultural crop. But if you're looking at it on a field scale, especially if you're looking at fiber and grain types, there's just a lot of basic agronomy that we don't understand. I mean, it's been 1936. We don't know if you've been growing corn and soybeans and wheat and rice, and today we still do plant density, row spacing experiments, fertilizer experiments. Things that we haven't been able to do in hemp for 80 years. So we've got a lot of just basic agronomy that we have to accomplish as well if we want to make this work on a larger field setting outside of the containerized. Yeah, I would assume on the white versus black pots, the temperature measurements were probably placed using a soil probe. They placed it in the pot to see what the temperature was. I don't think he was doing an external infrared gun on the outside of the pots to see the differences.
Actually, Dr. Meyers, I think he does.
does?
He
does
does.
that too?
An external for the actual container temperature, and then he has a soil probe as well. It's cool.
Yes, the question was CBD levels and really the differences between some of the more horticultural side, maybe the fiber side. If you look at CBD the cannabidol contents, essential oil types, you can get up to 18%, which is really quite high. Um, Most of the fiber types are much less. And we don't want to confuse this again with what Kaylee mentioned in the beginning about THC and the 0.3% uh, limit. You can actually grow grain and fiber types. There are dual purpose types that you can grow for basically you come through with a combine and basically just take off the tops of those plants, process that material, that floral material for CBD extraction, and then you can cut it off at the base and then use the rest for uh, fiber if you wanted to. It's trade-offs. The problem with growing the essential oil types on that big of acreage, again, as Katie was mentioning, is this the pollen from the males travels forever. One male in 3 or 4, 5 acres, and that's all you need. And that, if you're growing for the essential oils, that would cause a problem for you. But you can actually harvest the others, but you're just going to have to accept instead of getting 18% essential oils out of it, you may only be getting 5 or 6%. And just to contrast that with the medical marijuana, where we're looking at 0.3% as our threshold for THC content. If you go to the medical marijuana side or the recreational marijuana side, you're getting THC contents of 14, 15% or more. So actually only a single gene that this way or that way. So the quantities are much the same. It's just whether you're going this pathway or this pathway.
Multi-state project. Would you like to?
I think I take over from here. We largely mentioned this earlier. I mentioned much of this earlier, but there is a coordinated multi-state project at the national level that we're looking at the same 14 hemp strains. And we're trying to see whether they're adapted to Louisiana. But this experiment is also going on in California, Oregon, Kentucky, Tennessee, Illinois, Missouri, Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina, all over. And so that's our involvement with that, and that's specifically my involvement. As I said, the LSU AgCenter actually has a team of people who are involved. So we have 2 different faculty members working on insect or disease issues. I won't really mention much of those. I'll highlight them briefly. Agronomic practices, that's kind of me again, but I have to split my time between this and cotton research. So progress is slow. And then we also have a faculty member who's actually done some of the enterprise budgets to figure out whether this is even economical to do in Louisiana. So we'll just hit a couple of these. In terms of adaptation, I looked at 45 different varieties in 2020. I have 39 different varieties in 2021. These are split between both the essential oil types and the fiber grain types. And you can see some of the names here. The fiber grain types, the names are, they're just kind of names, you know. A lot of these are, and most of this material actually comes out of Europe, but I mean, CFX, X59, NWG is New West Genetics, Anka, Grandi, a couple of out of Greece as well. Not very exciting. Let's go over to the essential oil types, though, and look at some of the names we have over here. Cherry Wine, Maverick, Forbidden Seedless, Pine Walker, Stem Cell, Suver Haze, Hawaiian Haze. So, Special Sauce, and Bubbleberry. That was actually my student worker and I saying, you get to choose the one you wanted. He wanted Bubbleberry. I went for Special Sauce. But anyway, when we were transplanting the other day, but it's kind of interesting to see some of the name differences that come up here. We also see some of these actually have seedless. Again, hemp is naturally a diploid crop, so it has two sets of chromosomes. But you can actually produce a tetraploid, and then you can cross these together and come up with a triploid, much like they do watermelons. Like you get seedless watermelons, we can also breed seedless hemp by using some of our tricks in terms of manipulating the genetics. So that's actually something that's out there in addition to the feminized seed as well. All of this, from my perspective as a plant breeder, and that's where my training, everything in the hemp industry is covered by material transfer agreements, non-disclosure agreements. I can't do much of anything except hand the seed, put it in the ground, and I have to destroy everything at the end of the year, despite the fact that we have some other issues. In terms of pests and diseases that we see, right in the middle of southern blight. Kaylee would argue, and I would argue, and I think our pathologists would argue that southern blight is a scourge of hemp in Louisiana. And that's exactly what it does to your plant. It kills it right in the middle of the row. That's a soil-borne disease, so once it's in the soil, you're stuck with it for the next 15 to 20 years. So if you get it, you want to rip the plants out and mark that area off and say, stay away. In greenhouses, fusarium head blight is something I've seen. We see a lot of powdery mildew if you can't control your humidity in there. If you go to the insect sides, aphids, corn earworms, hemp russet mite, those are all three common ones. Fire ants also apparently love hemp as well. So you have to watch fire ants around your hemp plants. Economics, and I blacked out some numbers because who knows where we're at. But there are budgets that have been developed, spreadsheets that you can have access to, where you can put in what your spacing is, what your plants per acre are, figure out your seed cost per acre. You put in the things, how much is land rent, how much are your seed costs, your irrigation supplies, etc. And then you can put in what the current market price is and say whether you're going to make any money or not. So there is a lot of work in this area. The initial hype was high. The reality is a little less lofty. And I think with that, we've pretty much covered all of our prepared slides, and we have Jason has some slides or some pictures as well, and then we can open it up for any questions.
While we are transitioning, I did just realize Angela Guidry is here with us tonight from the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry, and she isn't going to be speaking, but I did ask her to join us tonight in case any of you have questions about licensing or any of the regulatory aspects of hemp in Louisiana.
Well, before I start showing some of the photos and start talking about them, we're still on Facebook Live. If there's any questions that anyone has at home, like uh, let that be known, and we can try to answer those too. Um, but yeah, me and Kaylee, I went out and photographed the plants on the 24th of last month, and once I was there, I got into the gates and everything. I went ahead and tried to conceptually try to think of ways that the plants could be photographed so that people can get different viewpoints, as well as to be able to see like the different textures of the plants, the leaves, things like that. So this one here is more of like just like a very tried to use the whole frame of the photo to kind of show how large scale and how many different leaves and stuff the plants grow. And like I was saying before, these are all shot on film, 35 millimeter. I did some 120 millimeter as well, and I just have to develop those. This photo has gotten more hype, I feel like, in the past month than most of the photos I've taken. And I think I was like telling Kaylee, like right before this photo, I was like I want to photograph y'all with the plants and kind of also show the size of the leaves as well. So Kaylee did her best hand modeling uh, interpretation, and that impression came out pretty well. I think the vibrancy of the leaves, especially like when you're looking at them, um, and kind of the lighting can get handled pretty well with film, so it's pretty accurate to what you're seeing in real life. And I kind of want to show that vibrancy of the leaves as well. This is like I wanted to do like a single plant so people could kind of see like how wide how big plants grow. Um, I'm a pretty big person. They were probably, I don't know, these plants are probably like th- maybe 4 feet, maybe, or maybe like 5 feet almost. So that was kind of eye opening, especially for me. I've never seen like plants this big before, and I kind of want to show that scale as well for people. I forget his name. What was the Adam? Lost. Oh, okay, yeah. Also, we lost power in here. Yeah, so Adam, he was working while we were photographing. So maybe like about 30 minutes after I photographed, we went to like the another spot, and I think Adam was like reluctant. He like immediately like, got up, and I was like, no, like just keep working, and then try to get the that concept of like workers working on the plants, being very hands on with them. This one I really like a lot. Especially with like a lot of my photography, I try to use depth of field to kind of show the perspective of how large scale things can be. And so with this photo in particular, um, I shot it so you can still see the walkway there, and you can kind of see some of the spacing in between each plant. You can see the white pots versus the black pots, and these plants in particular, they weren't covered, so I kind of wanted to show that as well, so you can kind of see different ways that the plants were grown and done research on. This one, I honestly, like, when I normally photograph stuff or, like, plants or anything like that, I normally wouldn't photograph something like this, because typically I would think people would be like, "This is a horrible photo, just like, why are you photographing dead plants?" But was talking to Kaylee, and I was like, "I think it'll be a cool perspective to show people, like what you were saying, like, how difficult it really is and how hands-on you have to be with the plants." These were some of the plants there that were kind of starting to yellow, and then like some big healthy plants that were kind of growing vibrantly. Oh, this was fun. So then I kind of started to. I wanted to see those ridges on the leaves there, as well as kind of show like kind of like a mystic energy, I guess you would say. So kind of showing like some stuff out of focus, some stuff in focus, as well as the skyline kind of plays a good contrast in colors. I was like laying down on the ground, photographing up, and I think I was telling Kaylee, I was like, "Oh, I can like actually smell like the leaves and the plants like coming off of it." So that was also kind of interesting to see for hemp plants. Too. It's kind of another the same concept of that as well. So kind of showing the leaves, how different leaves look. The plant that's dead there, that was like a grad students, I believe. My memory serves me correct. Or correct me.
Undergraduate students
Undergraduates.
looking at different rates of fertilization.
So I kind of wanted to once Kaylee was explaining like a lot of the stuff that she's explained today while I was photographing, and so I kind of wanted to show that as well to kind of show the different levels of research that there are from undergrad to grad to like people who've been in the field for a while.
And really, that might be a good thing to highlight because even though you see a dead plant, that's still a positive effect because in that study, it might look bad. Data is still good data. And so if we find a dead plant, hopefully we also find a good plant with it that we can compare to and learn. If there's a dead plant, it can also be.
And kind of like what I was saying earlier too, the depth of field. So kind of photographing that row so people could see like how vast and how long, like how, what's the size you think of the greenhouses that we were standing in that are photographed?
They are 60 feet by 33 feet.
So there, I mean, for me, that's pretty large scale. That's like one of the bigger greenhouses I've been in before. And so, like I said, I kind of wanted to show the greenhouse in the image as well. And then this was, I think my mom was saying it's like her favorite. Um, Typically, I don't photograph stuff landscape style, like camera composition. But once again, I kind of want to show the greenhouse in the image, and so you can kind of see that up there and how that's covered versus the plants and how many rows you have, the spacing in between them. Pulling on that photography concept of foreground and background. And those are the 10 images that I selected. I can flip back through them. And then, of course, if anyone has like any questions about anything that I've shown, uh, feel free to ask. All the photos, they're printed, they're 10 by 15s, they're archival, so all of them are like numbered. I print to order, so that kind of controls uh the demand, I guess you would say, of that. And that was something I learned just from exhibiting in New Orleans, having meetings with the New Orleans Museum of Art and things like that, trying to be more archival with like how I'm photographing and printing things as well. Uh, but I'm always trying to push the approach of how I'm trying to photograph things or present them to people as well. And so it's interesting to kind of go from just like the idea at my house, like eating and being like, oh, it'd be really cool to photograph these plants. And then I think maybe the same week Kaylee posted a photo of her working in the field. And I was like, oh, let me talk to Kaylee. And so we started the conversation and talks for this like a year ago. So to kind of see it go into fruition is kind of great. And Melissa, the archivist here, she's been very hands on and always trying to connect with the community. And that's kind of a big thing I like to do as well. Is try to bring some empowerment and strengthen the community through different educational things that I don't know. Things are growing rapidly and trendy, so I feel like it's kind of a good timing as well for everything. Anyone have any questions?
I that's kind of out of the question is, I think, where we are on the medical side in terms of the marijuana, in terms of pain relief, etc. That's really kind of out of our sphere. I mean, anecdotally, it's largely used for pain relief. It can be used uh, to increase appetite because can be there.
It's something more particular. Let's say if it's something like the hemp lotions and things like that, the essential oils,
Yeah.
for people who've never experienced what that is like, how would you describe it?
Something that kind of provides the opportunity to talk about something else at the same time. There is a lot of efficacy with these products. However, because there is not that much regulation, find some people who swear by it, they love it, it works wonders for their achy joints, pains, whatever it might be. And then other people, they don't feel anything, partly due to the fact this is still a new market. But in terms of looking at it from a pharmaceutical standpoint, that is more that or that isn't the ag centers. So I think some people at Pennington
Yes.
Biomedical are looking into it from
Yeah.
the medicinal standpoint.
I know of at least two faculty members at LSU who are actually looking at the essential oil types. One is using a zebrafish model to look at neurological diseases, palsies and stuff like that, and being able to calm some of those. And there's another person over in the entomology department who's actually using fruit flies that he's genetically engineered to um, have a medical malady, and he's using some of the extracts that we're trying to produce at LSU to test those model in that model system as well. So there are some potential medical side, pharmaceutical implications for even the essential oil types outside of the medical marijuana side.
Great question. Anybody have any other questions or anything they would like to just state about what's been presented today? If not, I'll let Dr. Meyers or Kaylee say anything that they have left to say, and then we'll check the Facebook Live, perhaps.
Have anything you would like to just say?
Quite a bit of We have quite a bit of information on our website. If anybody is interested in learning more about getting into the business, if you will, we have a link to the most current hemp law and our current regulations on the website. We have a large frequently asked questions section. It is a highly regulated program to participate in. It requires a lot of reporting. And like these folks up here said tonight, it's really not that easy to grow because we have so many obstacles here in Louisiana to fight and not a lot of tools in our toolbox. So these guys got their work cut out for them so that folks like you can maybe participate in this one day in the future. The website I'm referring to is Louisiana Department of Ag and Forestry's Industrial Hemp website.
Right. No other questions? All right, everybody, let's give our panelists a warm round of applause. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. Thank you.